The royals remember, the Queen wears 5 poppies as she is joined by Kate, William, Harry and Meghan for the Festival of Remembrance at Royal Albert Hall on eve of the 100th anniversary of the armistice. Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex joined senior royals including the Queen to remember Britain's World War I victims in the Royal Albert Hall tonight. Theresa May was also in attendance after laying wreaths and reciting a poem, The Soldiers' Cemetery, by Sergeant John William Streets, yesterday in France and Belgium. Watching on alongside the Queen were the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, and the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. All were dressed in dark clothing as they watched from the royal box. They gave a standing ovation to welcome the Chelsea pensioners and as bereaved family members walked onto the stage. Rows of poppies adorned the room and were projected onto the floor. The annual Festival of Remembrance in London, which commemorates the war dead, included performances from Sir Tom Jones, Sir Bryn Terfel and Sheridan Smith and was presented by the BBC's Hugh Edwards. The royal family stood as thousands of audience members attending the Festival of Remembrance held aloft photographs of those who took part in the First World War, and descendants stood in the middle of the Royal Albert Hall with pictures of their ancestors. Theresa May and her husband Philip held aloft photographs of 2 of her ancestors, including Private Hubert Brazier Grant, of the East Surrey Regiment, who died at Passchendaele in 1917 aged 19. The Prime Minister attended a service to mark the centenary of the battle last year and found her father's cousin's name on the Menin Gate Memorial in Belgium. A photograph was also shown of the PM's grandfather Sergeant Major Tom Brazier, who served with the King's Royal Rifle Corps. Sir Tom Jones led the musical performances, singing Coming In on a Wing and a Prayer alongside the RAF squadronaires. Sheridan Smith was backed softly by a piano as she sang Are You Just Sleeping, while Tom Fletcher from McFly performed Born to Fly with Danny Jones, which he wrote to celebrate 100 years of the Royal Air Force. Sheku Kana Mason, the cellist who delighted millions at Harry and Meghan's wedding earlier this year, played a modern version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah to a hushed crowd. The crowd clapped along as members of the Royal Navy, the Army and the Royal Air Force marched in and gathered in formation at the center of the room. In a pre-recorded message, William paid tribute to Hadley Court Defence Medical Rehabilitation Center, which closes this year. He said the facility may be shutting its doors for the last time but it would always hold a special place in the hearts of all those who were treated there. Work in Nottinghamshire would continue to build on its legacy, he said. Singing then filled the hall as everyone stood together to sing the hymn Jerusalem. The night comes ahead of the 100th anniversary of the armistice, when World War I ended. It has been organized by Armed Forces charity the Royal British Legion as a thank you to all who served, sacrificed and changed our world and will be broadcast on BBC One at 20:30 tonight. A message on the Legion's website read, 100 years ago the First World War ended, and a new world began. The example and experience of those who lived through it shaped the world we live in today. At the Festival of Remembrance this year, in the presence of the royal family, the Royal British Legion is leading the nation in saying thank you to all who served, sacrificed and changed our world. Noticeably, Her Majesty the Queen arrived wearing 5 poppies, while others, like Theresa May, wore 1 Remembrance Day poppy. The Queen has sworn 1, 3 and 5 in the past but it is not known for sure why. What is known is that it's totally her discretion as to how many she wears, with no royal protocol stating when and where Her Majesty should wear a poppy. Some theories state the number 5 could be a direct reference to each service in the war, the Army, Navy, RAF, Civil Defense and Women. After tonight's event at the Albert Hall, there will be a candlelit vigil to pay tribute to the generation of a century ago as we congregate on the eve of Armistice Day to mark 100 years since the guns fell silent. The event will be held at National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. The same venue will be the scene of an annual outdoor Armistice Day service on Sunday. Tomorrow, the Prince of Wales will once again lead the nation in honoring the country's war dead during the National Service of Remembrance while the Queen observes from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Also on Sunday, in a historic act of reconcile, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier will lay a wreath at the cenotaph along with Prince Charles and Theresa May. A service in Westminster Abbey will also be held, alongside events in Glasgow, Cardiff, and Belfast. to honor those who returned home from the Great War. Also tomorrow, Charles will lay a wreath at the cenotaph in Whitehall on the Queen's behalf, the second successive year he will perform the duty. Millions of people will fall silent this weekend to mark 100 years since the end of the First World War, and a series of events and tributes have already paid homage to Britain's war heroes. Earlier today, the Duke of Sussex appeared in a somber mood as he bowed his head in memory of the fallen soldiers before he laid a wreath of poppies on the field at Twickenham today ahead of England's crunch match against New Zealand. The Prince, a patron of the Rugby Football Union, met with descendants of two England captains, Lancelot Slicock and Ronnie Colton, who both died in the First World War. His Royal Highness, who was not with his wife Meghan at the ground, also met two rugby players who are supported by the RFU Injured Players Foundation, of which the Duke is also patron. A moment's silence for those who served and gave their lives for their country was observed before England were narrowly defeated by the All Blacks. Yesterday, tens of thousands of people gathered at the Tower of London in a bid to catch a glimpse of the 10,000 torches installed in memory of those killed in the First World War. The installation, beyond the deepening shadow, will be open to the public until Remembrance Sunday tomorrow, the culmination of this year's remembrance to the fallen. At the start of the war, Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey famously declared, "The lamps are going out all over Europe." The vast commemorative exercise at the Tower of London represents the moment they came back on again, along with the grief of those who survived to rebuild the shattered world. Their poppies came in all shapes and sizes, strikingly displayed on somber dark evening wear, but the message was the same: they shall not be forgotten. When the Queen joined other royals to pay tribute to the fallen at last night's Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall, Her Majesty's cluster of no fewer than 5 poppies fastened in a brooch was certainly the biggest. One theory is that she wears one poppy for each branch of the services, Navy, Army, and Air Force, plus one each to represent civil defense and women. Whatever the reason, Her Majesty's tribute was certainly difficult to miss. The Duchess of Cambridge, meanwhile, limited herself to 3 paper poppies fastened in place by her brooch, wearing her poppies on her right breast instead of the traditional left, to be close to the heart. The reason was probably because her asymmetric dress was revealingly cut on the left-hand side, with no space for a poppy. The Duchess of Sussex made do with a far more modest poppy enamel pin, and Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, chose a £29.99 Women of the First World War brooch, issued by the Royal British Legion, which has proved so popular that it has sold out this year. Sophie, Countess of Wessex's brooch didn't appear to be in this year's poppy range, suggesting that she may have recycled one she had already. The male members of the royal family, including Princes William and Harry, contented themselves with one simple paper poppy each adorning their military medals. The royal family stood as thousands of audience members attending the event held aloft photographs of family members who took part in the First World War. Theresa May and her husband Philip held aloft photographs of 2 of her ancestors, one of them Private Hubert Brazier Grant, of the East Surrey Regiment, who died at the Battle of Passchendaele in 1917, aged 19. Mrs. May attended after returning from Europe, where she lay wreaths and recited a poem in both France and Belgium. Sir Tom Jones led the musical performances, singing "Coming In on a Wing" and a prayer while accompanied by the RAF Squadronaires, a big band orchestra. Sheridan Smith was backed softly by a piano as she sang "Are You Just Sleeping?" while Tom Fletcher from McFly performed "Born to Fly" with Danny Jones, which he wrote to celebrate 100 years of the Royal Air Force. Sheku Kana Mason, the cellist who delighted millions at Harry and Meghan's wedding earlier this year, played a modern version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah to the hushed crowd, and there was a contribution too from the Kingdom Choir, which also performed to acclaim at the wedding in Windsor in May. The audience clapped along as members of the Royal Navy, the Army and the Royal Air Force marched in and gathered in formation at the center of the room.